Okay, well, let's go over these then. You can make some notes, and there are a couple of things that I want you to notice as far as the types of question goes that I'll call your attention to. So as far as the prisoner is concerned, reality would consist of nothing but what? How many had A? B, C, B, C. Yeah, it's C. I mean, so some of them are going to be pretty straightforward. Others are going to be a little more involved, which is, any good test should have usually a mix of types of questions and a difference in the level of difficulty. Okay, so two, I don't want you to necessarily remember all of the little subtle pieces of the pie that we went over in that history of philosophy video, but I would like you, and these are mentioned in your textbook, to at least know the basic, divisions of philosophy, which we went over. I mean, epistemology is what? The study or the theory of knowledge, right? The theory of reality is more like metaphysics. Obviously, ethics deals with, right and wrong. What does aesthetics deal with? Even though we won't be doing much in here. It's actually the philosophy of art. I don't think I've got a question on aesthetics for you, but the social and political philosophy. Yeah, did you?
I didn't hear what you said.
I said aesthetics is the philosophy of art.
Right.
Deals with questions like whether there are any objective standards for what makes something beautiful, and what are they, or is beauty just into the eye of the beholder? Is it relative? Questions like that. Is art there's a theory called the expression theory of art. Is its main purpose to express emotions? Is that how it differs from other things? Keep on circulating the roll. I think it stopped on some.
Metaphysics.
Yes. Metaphysics deals with the nature of reality, what exists, how, whether everything is ultimately only one kind of stuff or many kinds of things. Okay, so you might see something on the branches of philosophy. Number 3 in the Apology. Now, we didn't read through the Apology, but there were some sections of the Apology. But this is one of the main questions or main points we deal with. Socrates argues that the unexamined life is not worth living. Wisdom through philosophy is to be sought only after one finds wealth. Inner goodness is impossible, or confidence in our own wisdom is the true goal of philosophy. How many had A? Okay, have some votes for A. What about B? Okay, some people on B. C? D? Well, here, basically, it's that the unexamined life is not worth living. And part of what we mean by examining our life is what they were doing in the cave, examining our uncritically accepted beliefs, but also examining what we think is a good life for a human being, and that's what Aristotle was doing in his Ethics. Okay, so for in Crito, now there's something that I want you to notice about this question. Some of them, not all, some of them may have either an all the above or none of the above option. So you want to, like, if you know it's A, you want to not stop there, but also look over the other options, because it could be A, but also be B and C, and the correct answer would be D, all the above. And you don't get it right if it's all the above and you only have A or B. Remember, on these, only one selection is correct. Okay, this is not multiple choice where you know. Okay, that's what they give in med school. You know, that's one reason why if you're getting A's, you may only be getting C's in med school because it's so hard. You know, but you know what they say in med school. What do they call somebody who goes through all of med school and gets nothing but C's? They call them doctor, because that's all you need to pass. And that's all you need to do. The answer to the question is, what do they call somebody who goes through med school and gets only C's? Doctor. That's the... think about that the next time you're in your doctor's waiting office. All right, well, let's go, move on here. So in Crito, and we did go over the Crito. I'm going to look at some of those arguments, which I printed out for you. Okay, does Socrates argue that laws have a divine basis, that they're made and should be obeyed because the people who make them are the stronger, that is, the people in power, might makes right, like Thrasymachus thought? Or does he think we need to obey the laws because if we're voluntarily living in a society, we have an understood contract to do that? How many say A? What about B? What about C? Okay, we got some votes for C. It is C. But note here there's a D option. Now, that's not the correct choice on this particular question, but it might be. Now, 5 is an example of a type of question that you're not going to see many of at all, but occasionally you might. This is, the way I worded this one is a bit challenging. Now, all of these questions at one time or another were on one of my intro tests. So the released prisoner finally comes to realize that what he saw before was A, true reality, or the shadow's true reality, B, just an illusion, C, of little or no value, and note what the D option is, both B and C. So, how many say A? Okay, had some votes for A. What about B? Okay, so a vote for B. What about C? Well, this one I actually, what about D? How many had D? Okay, well, good. Several people did C. It actually is D. In other words, he understands that the shadows were an illusion; they weren't really reality. But also, that what passed for knowledge is not something that's of value. I mean, knowledge about the shadows is not knowledge of reality. So that's an example of a type of question that might be on, but you're not going to see many of those. So true or false, remember on the Scantron form, A equals true, B equals false, right? So it'll be either A or B. Here, I just said mark a T or an F. So Socrates attempted to escape from prison, but his escape plan was foiled. Is that true or false? False, right? He didn't try to escape. 7, in the allegory of the cave, the prisoners were glad when their friend told them about the world outside the cave. No, not really, right? What did they say that do to somebody? Yeah, right. They thought the journey messed him up. They said, hey, you try to take me out there, and I'm going to do what to you? I'm going to kill you, right? And that was a sideways reference to Socrates. Remember, Plato was writing this dialogue to people in Athens who were around when Socrates was convicted, some of whom were responsible for it. So that's, just an example of how I might do sample questions. Now, I'm going to go through this a little fast because some of this stuff I've already put on the board. Boy, this mouse is not behaving. Now remember, the allegory of the cave is also called. Okay, that's not the right. Okay, whatever you need, take one. Whatever you need. Okay, so I'm recording this. So I'm going to go a little fast. And we won't get through the whole thing. I never do, but I usually start with the stuff that's the farthest back, because the other stuff we've covered more recently, right? So the prisoner's situation, is that they are prisoners. What they wear, here I'm not so much concerned about their clothing as what? The fact that what's chained for them. Right, their head and their necks, besides their hands and feet, and the reason he points this out is the second part, that it limits their vision because their head and their necks are chained. It limits their vision to what's in front of them, and what is in front of them. What are they looking at, the prisoners? Looking at the wall in front of them and what's going on the wall. People are carrying things on the raised wall in back of them. On the wall in front of them, they're seeing what? There's the shadows, right? In other words, you've got the fire in back of them, and then people on a walkway walking in front of the fire, and these people are casting shadows because of the fire on the wall in front of the prisoners. But the prisoners, because they're chained, can see only the shadows. And what's the belief they develop about the shadows? That they are what? The most real things. That is their reality. And of course, that's why we are like the prisoners. Not that we've been visiting caves or we've been chained in a cave, but why? See, the prisoners are growing up, and all this stuff I put on the board. The prisoners were growing up in a particular intellectual environment. They formulated beliefs about the world and what's real, beliefs that they thought were true because that's all they've known. That we know from the story, many of them turned out not to be true because they think the shadows are the most real things. But we formulate beliefs about what is right and wrong, what's real, what's true from, the sources we come into contact with in our environment. And so we're like the prisoners in that respect. Okay, scratch out Plato's theory of reality. Remember, because we lost the first day and we're behind anyway, I said to kind of catch us up some, I would scratch Plato's theory of the forms, because that had a separate, fairly long PowerPoint going with it. That's Plato's theory of reality. In other words, the allegory can be viewed on two levels. One as a story about what philosophy tries to do in getting us to examine the beliefs we grew up with. This is what Socrates was trying to do with his fellow Athenians. Confront them on views that they had accepted all their lives from being in Athens that may or may not be good views, right? And so philosophy gets us to do this. Plato also meant this to be a story about his own technical theory of reality, which has this world being different from the world that he calls the world of the forms. But we're not going to worry about that interpretation of it. So some of these things, well, the cave again represents this sort of environment where we grew up, our culture, and the prisoners, of course, are supposed to be like us in that we were sort of put in a particular environment. The shadows then represent for us the beliefs that we hold and what we take to be true. In other words, beliefs that we refer to as our uncritically accepted beliefs. The beliefs that we've just soaked up from our own culture, from our own family, from our education, from books we've read, from movies we've seen, from stuff on the internet. And like the prisoners, not all of our beliefs may be good beliefs, right? I mean, take Martin Luther King, right? He is trying to confront, like Socrates confronted people as a gadfly, a horsefly. Socrates was confronting his fellow Athenians about their own worldview and their own beliefs that they soaked up from their culture. Martin Luther King, in that Birmingham jail, has been challenging people in that culture on the cultural belief you would have acquired had you gone up there that, hey, segregationist laws are just fine. It's fine, They might have even believed that slavery was okay. And so, excuse me, he's trying to challenge them on the concept of a just law and try to say, well, look, if we get an objective concept of a just law, and you do want to go over those. I don't list that on the sheet, but we did put the characteristics of a just versus an unjust law on the board, and you might go over your notes again on that. But Martin Luther King then is trying to challenge people on beliefs that they would have grown up accepting as part being in that society, namely the belief that segregationist laws are just fine. That's a belief you would have. Had you been the son of a wealthy plantation owner in the pre-Civil War South, one of the beliefs you would have grown up with is that slavery was just fine. That's what my culture tells me. Now is your culture always right? And this is what we're getting at here, that there may be beliefs that, like the prisoners in the cave, people have soaked up from their culture, and maybe not all of them are good beliefs. You wouldn't want to keep on believing in the tooth fairy if there was none, or if there was no big fat man at the North Pole bringing presents, every 24th of December. You wouldn't want to continue believing that. Now, I'm not trying to rock somebody's world here. I told you the thing I got from the internet about Santa Claus, didn't I? Or did I tell that to the Essex people? Right, the 4 stages of life. Stage 1, you believe in Santa Claus. Stage 2, you don't believe in Santa Claus. Stage 3, you are Santa Claus. And stage 4, you begin to look like Santa Claus. I'll let you all guess which stage of life I am to be in, right? It was a little more obvious when I still had my mustache there. Okay, let's move on, folks. The point is, in this way of looking at Plato's story, he means it to be a story about how philosophy gets us to challenge beliefs that we've just accepted as true without really looking at them very closely. Right, so the shadows then can represent the beliefs we've soaked up, or unreflected beliefs that may or may not be true. Really, the fire and the sun is kind of like what sheds light on it. Remember, it's a little harder to make every little point of the story work for this way of interpreting it. But certainly, after we're confronted by philosophy, which is what happens. That's what's happening when the prisoner is being challenged and let up out of the cave. The released prisoner. He's the philosophy student. Come on. My computer is going to sleep on me. And he's being confronted, and the guide is pretty much the experienced philosopher, the philosophy teacher. Also, specifically, Plato means Socrates, especially later when he comes back into the cave and his buddies say, look, this trip has really messed up your eyesight. You try to take me on that journey and I'll kill you. We already mentioned that, right? Socrates is meant there. So the objects casting the shadows, you can say that they're maybe, well, in Plato's story, they're the real things, right? The prisoners think the shadows are the most real things. So these are, good beliefs that we can hold, beliefs that pass muster. And remember, philosophy gets us to examine our most fundamental concepts. What's virtue? What's a just law? And also the arguments behind our beliefs, the arguments that support our beliefs. And this is what we see next in the Crito. But so the attitude of the prisoners toward the released prisoner, the world outside the cave is the world of sort of enlightenment, where we accept, where we've been confronted by philosophy and we've maybe rejected some of our beliefs, maybe found better reasons for others. Scratch out the practical consequences of the problem of free will. That was a cut and paste error. Before they had me revise the syllabus, I used to do the problem of freedom of the will and how it links up with moral responsibility a little earlier in the semester, and so that's why that was on that review sheet for test 1. Just scratch that out. We're going to look at that later. Okay, so I'm not looking for you on these Crito arguments to look with a fine-tooth comb or to memorize the progress of these, but read them over and get some idea of the reasons Socrates cited. Remember, Crito and his buddies try to say, Socrates, we got to worry about public opinion. What are people going to say about us, your friends? Aren't they going to say some friends they could have bailed him out of jail if they had only wanted to spend the money? What's history going to think of us? And they also say, look, Socrates, what's public opinion going to think about you if you don't even try to escape? They're going to think you were a wimp for not even wanting to try. So, and his friends also confront him with the fact that even though he's old, he's 70 years old, he has a wife that's 20 years younger and some young sons. Don't you want to be around to see them educated? But Socrates says, look, I'm not worried about public opinion. Socrates does not respect public opinion very much because he says, look, take an Olympic athlete. That athlete could really be led astray in his training if he looked at public opinion instead of the opinions of the experienced Olympic coach that he was under, right? The public might be, oh, go ahead and eat that cheeseburger, whereas that might not be good for his training, right? And so Socrates says, in matters moral, we need to listen to an expert. Well, who's the expert? It's Socrates himself, right? So he says, I'm going to reason through this thing. So the way I'm going to make my decision is not by listening to public opinion and what they might say, but Socrates says, I always try to go with the best beliefs that are supported by the best arguments. So I'm going to say, what arguments are there? What reasoning supports your view of things versus my view of things? And so basically, he gets up some reasoning, the conclusion of which is that he should stay, right? That's the moral thing to do. Socrates doesn't want to harm his soul by doing something morally wrong. If I escape, I'd overturn the laws of the state, right? He was sentenced to death. He could have proposed exile at his trial. He rejected that option and gave an in-your-face reply. Did not give a real penalty. I want free meals for life, a state pension, because in being a gadfly and confronting you, I'm such a valuable service. I shouldn't need to worry about where my next meal's coming from. Well, the jury said no. The only real penalty they had was the death penalty. So he would be overturning the verdict of the courts and disrespecting the laws of the state if he took up his friend's offer to escape, right? And he also says he'd be harming the state as if it were another human being, because if private individuals thought they could overthrow the verdict, of the courts and the whole legal system, they'd be harming the state. And so he says there's this moral principle that we shouldn't cause harm to somebody else. I'd be harming the state. You see that in the second argument. Therefore, I shouldn't escape. Now, he also says the state has been like a parent to him. And so he says two things follow from that. One, a child should respect his or her parent. And two, when a child is not on the same level with his or her parents. Now, I think this is a bad argument, but Socrates says even if we were punished unjustly by our parents, we should just take it and not slap our parents back if they slapped us on the wrist wrongly for taking a cookie out of the cookie jar, right? That's not Socrates' illustration, but that's the kind of thing he's hinting at here. So he says the state's been like a parent to him. We shouldn't disobey our parents. We have no right to strike back against them. So if in escaping I would be doing that, I shouldn't escape. So if I escape, I'd be disobeying a parent. I shouldn't do that, so I shouldn't escape. Also, Socrates says if he's voluntarily lived in Athens when he could have gone elsewhere, if he didn't approve of their laws and the way they did things in their courts, he could have left. He says, because I've stayed, I have an understood contract, understood agreement to obey the laws and respect the verdicts of the courts. He says I would be rejecting this if I left. So he says because I shouldn't break my contracts or my agreements, I should stay. I should not escape. Because escaping would be breaking an agreement. So that's a summary of Socrates' reasoning. Again, keep in mind the main points here, right? I shouldn't escape because I shouldn't want to harm the state. I shouldn't disobey a parent, and I shouldn't break an agreement. Those are the main things that's going on there, right? And what you have here is what I did was the reason why the part on virtue ethics is so detailed is because this is the PowerPoint. This is what the outline printout of the PowerPoint looks like. So I've saved you some trouble in giving you that, And maybe at this point we only have a few minutes. I know I wouldn't get through everything, but I like to go back to the farthest stuff back because Aristotle's Virtue Ethics is the most recent. But again, you want to look at the model of a virtue and know what it is, that it's the midpoint between two vices of deprivation and excess. Look at some of the models of particular virtues. Look at his story of how we develop a virtue, and look at the place happiness plays in his ethics, that it's the goal of the moral life is to achieve eudaimonia, or happiness, well-being, those are some of the things to focus on in looking at Aristotle's ethics. We did the ontological argument recently. Again, the recording came out, so there is, if you missed that day, there's a recording, integrity recording of where we went over, the PowerPoint on the ontological argument. Again, I would remind you of Yogi Berra, who just passed away at 90. One of the things he said is sometimes you can observe a lot just by watching. Sometimes you can, just by re-watching a PowerPoint, integrity recording or something, or looking over the PowerPoint, it's surprising how much you can learn just by, exposing yourself to the material again. So, okay, bringing over to pencil. I will have some, but the one way to make sure that you got a good one with a good eraser is to do that. There are going to be 30 questions. There's a 10-point curve built in, right? In other words, you're only responsible for 25, but there are going to be 30. So technically you could score 110 points on this test, even though you're only going to be averaged out for 100, right? Because the essay is 50, and there are 30 questions for 2 points apiece, for 60 points. So there's a bit of a built-in curve, you know. So anyway, make sure to buy your Scantron, because you want to have it with you. And so you'll be free to leave. Some people will finish in 25 minutes. Some people will take the whole period, you know. So we're not going to do anything other than that. So, okay. Take care. If you have a question, fine. Or if you have a draft you want to run by me. Now remember, I want to see a printout of your essay, not an email thing, and you don't need to submit it online through Turnitin or anything, but still you want to do your own work. You do not need a works cited page citing the textbook. That's understood, okay? And it's understood that you're writing a lot of this from the textbook or the PowerPoints. Okay, let me stop this for a second. And